Yeah, welcome students, welcome Stryker folks, and welcome Seattle U colleagues and anyone else who might be with us. I want to welcome us everybody to the first of our Courageous Career Conversations, a DEI conversation in partnership with the Main Career Engagement Office and also with the Albers Placement Center. My name is Mary Lou Moffitt, so I'm the director of the Albers Placement Center, and I get the honor of welcoming you today. So welcome to our very first Courageous Career Conversation. We are so lucky. This will be a commitment from the university to provide a DEI webinar every quarter. So we're very honored tonight to have Stryker partnering with us. And we're excited to hear from our guest speaker tonight. So students, if you don't know who Stryker is, it's super cool. Medical technology company located over in Redmond. I think of them as the heart defibrillator company, but I know they have many more products and just a beautiful campus over what I call a Redmond area. So they have some great internships. So we're super lucky to have them partnering with us tonight. I also want to thank Nesby too, because I know that Nesby and Christiana has been very supportive as well in helping us market the event tonight. So, you know, we're looking forward to having a great evening. So just some etiquette or some housekeeping for us. We're going to try to everybody can be on mute while our guest speaker presents this evening, and we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. And students, you know, if you have a question that comes to mind right away during the presentation, don't be afraid to put that in the chat. We've got Melissa from Seattle U and Shirley from Stryker, who will be monitoring that chat for us. And then once we get to the Q&A, we'll open it up and try to make it as casual and informal as we possibly can. So with that, if you'd like and feel comfortable turning on your video, you can, but I also know it's the dinner time, so we're just honored to have you with us. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Carol. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lou, for that welcome, and welcome students and everyone. Before we move forward, I wanted to do a land acknowledgement, which is something our institution has encouraged us to be doing and recognizing whenever we host any of our events. And so as we begin our gathering today, we all respectfully acknowledge that our event is taking place on Duwamish Aboriginal territory. We pay respect to Duwamish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. To acknowledge this land is to recognize its longer history and our place in that history. It is to recognize these lands and waters and their significance for the peoples who've lived and continue to live in this region, whose practices and spiritualities were and are tied to the land and the water, and whose lives continue to enrich and develop in relationship to the land, waters, and other inhabitants today. Thank you. All right, so my name is Carol Lawali, and I will be sort of moderating or facilitating the conversation with our guest tonight. And without further ado, I want to welcome Seyi. And Seyi, let's start with you introducing yourself, and we'll go from there.
Hey, thank you, Carol, and I'm extremely pleased to be here. My name is Seyi Akanni. I work for Stryker as a project engineer. So I work in research and development, and specifically working on new product development for the next generation of our monitor defibrillator series. I work on accessories and hardware components. I also do program integration work as well.
Thank you. So, talk to us a little bit about your journey there. How how did you get there? How did you land to where you are today? You know, maybe share with us some of your aspirations and maybe inspirations at the time.
Okay, definitely. I will first start with why I went into engineering. And it all goes back to my freshman year of high school geometry class. There were two engineers from the local Chevron refinery who came in, and they essentially showed us a promotional video. The gist of it was, hey kids, if you take this math that you're doing right now and apply it, these are all these amazing technology and products that you can develop and essentially change the world. And from that moment on, I literally looked at everything differently. Anything that was man-made, I could see how an engineer had something to do with it. And I saw technology as a way to transform our world. And so for me, I looked at it as, okay, you know, it's like a calling, right? So I went home that day to my mom and I told her, hey, this is what I learned at school today. And I was really excited. And then she said to me, oh, your dad was an engineer. A few weeks before the beginning of my freshman year of high school, my father unfortunately died in a car accident. And so I knew he was in science. He had a PhD. I knew he was brilliant, but I'd never asked him really about what he did. And so once I heard that, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to be an engineer. And so I spent the rest of that as my focus and applying to colleges. I went to Stanford for my undergrad and did that in mechanical engineering. Then my senior year, I was, to be honest, feeling a bit burnt out, if I'm being honest. And I spoke to my advisor. It was probably beginning of winter quarter. And I said to her that, you know, I'm not sure. Originally, I'd planned to just go straight to grad school, but I'm thinking maybe should I just go into work? And she said to me, well, why not apply to both, seek both out, and then let the options before you, you know, determine what you do next. And so I'm glad that she gave me that advice. I followed through with it. And then it worked out that I had both an offer from Boeing and as well as admission to University of Washington's mechanical engineering master's program. And so then I figured, okay, I'm moving to Seattle, right? And so I decided at the end of my senior year that I would defer for 1 year, focus on working and getting used to that experience, and then go back to graduate school. Well, after 1 year of having a salary and not being on a college student budget, I liked that experience. And so then I decided that, okay, I'll do grad school part-time. And thankfully, the company was supportive of that. And so I worked part-time, I worked full-time and part-time, living, you know, professional by day, student by evening and weekends and whatnot when I could fit it in, and eventually finished that. I was at Boeing for overall 9.5 years. So I continued working for them afterwards, worked in 7 different work groups, 3 different organizations, 2 different divisions. So a variety of experiences. And then I determined that when I was looking forward, okay, well, I really did enjoy working on airplanes. They're fascinating. I still am excited when I see one outside. I also knew that I wanted to get back to what was driving me to do engineering, which was that I wanted to get back to basic needs. And so I then looked at changing industries and decided to go with medical. I saw this opportunity with what was then Physio Control, but we are now a part of Stryker, and to work on the LifePak series and defibrillator monitoring series. And for me, I think when it comes to basic needs, you don't get any more basic than the opportunity to save someone's life. Our products are used to help someone that might be leaving this world and give them a fighting chance at surviving. And so I'm so proud of the products that we work on. And again, working also going from engineering and more into a project management or technical project management, but I'm still working on development of technology.
Wow, that's fantastic. And, you know, what do you think, like, what is it about your upbringing, or, you know, what are some of the values that were driving you to say, I need to change and I wanted to be in somewhere that has sort of this human direct impact, like to go into medical field? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So in terms of my upbringing, so my parents are Nigerian immigrants, and so I was definitely raised with the culture. As I mentioned, my father was an engineer, my mom is a nurse, my other uncles are doctors, professors, and so always very much academically focused. I will say that having been to Nigeria several times, I was born and raised in California, but I have had the opportunity to visit several times. I've been able to see what a difference technology can make, right? And there are a lot of things that we have that we take for granted, right? We don't think twice about. And so I see a lot of those opportunities, as well as people being so incredibly creative in terms of what they do and with the resources that they have. So I think some of that for me is definitely a driving factor. And just recognizing that it's not necessarily equal playing field around the world, but I see technology as a means to help with that. And also, again, getting back to the values of seeing, like, family is really important, obviously, being educated, continue to push yourself. My parents, again, coming from Nigeria, they did grow up in poverty. And coming here sacrificed so much, right? And so that's why I work really hard, always working really hard to do my best and do it well.
So, it seems like your family, you have had examples of Black professionals in your family going into these STEM fields, engineering, medicine, those kinds of things. So tell us, how was it showing up in the workplace as a Black woman, as an immigrant? What was that experience? Because obviously you went in saying, okay, I've seen people do this, I can do this, but how were you received and how has that been for you?
So for me, with being a Black woman in engineering, I often, as I'm about to walk into a room, recognize that I'm probably the only one that looks like me, or maybe one of a few, and I walk in anyway. That for me is how I show up as a Black person in this industry. Another part of it for me as well is how I continue to express myself as I am. So as a Black woman, I choose to wear my hair naturally. It is a choice. There are some places where that's not as welcome. I have been so fortunate throughout my career that that has not been an issue for me. And if anything, many of my colleagues have been very supportive or interested in whatnot. I do remember though, the last time I straightened my hair, and I don't do it very often, but the last time I did, I remember being at the coffee machine and a colleague, passed by and she complimented me and she's like, "Oh, your hair looks very nice today. It looks more professional." And I simply smiled and thanked her for the compliment, finished making my tea and went back to my desk. And for me, I thought, okay, I'm sure it was coming from a good place. At the same time, how is it that my hair, as it grows out of my head naturally, is not considered professional? So in making that choice and continuing to do that, for me, that's again bringing forward who I am and my background. Another aspect for me is with my family being Nigerian, and I just love clothes in general, but I actually wear Nigerian clothes to work. I've been very fortunate that my family and close family friends will offer to make outfits, and I'll ask for designs that I can wear to work. My feel about it is that if I can wear this in Nigeria to work, why not wear it here? And it is me showing my culture, right? And that can be, I'm still in the room with everyone else, just the same, doing the same kind of work. And this is just me expressing my heritage and cultural background.
Yeah. Wow. I'm even thinking back to when you're confronted with some of these ideas of professionalism. Mm-hmm. Have you had opportunity to sort of ask people to reflect on that and why that they think that this is professional and something else is not? Have you had an opportunity to maybe reflect on that, or be in a larger conversation about that?
I would say that not necessarily directly. I would say this actually reminds me of another time. So I came back from Nigeria and I'd gotten these really long, beautiful braids done. And I'd been away from the office for a few weeks. And one of my colleagues, when he saw me, reached out because he used to touch my hair, and I almost had the Matrix move to but I stopped him. I said, why do you think that that's okay, right? Like, why would you think that that's okay? And so I'm not sure how he walked away from it, right? But in terms of with being different and people's views and everything about what's considered professional or not professional, while I don't necessarily have direct conversations, I do believe that as I continue to show up and do that I'm demonstrating that to others, right? Maybe indirectly, that, hey, like these are professional hairstyles and I don't have to straighten my hair to do that. I can choose to, and that's great, but there are other ways of still being professional and showing that, and still also being who I am and how I like to carry myself in this world.
Fantastic, thank you. So I was wondering when, if you could share with us maybe even some lessons as being a Black engineer and going into the field in predominantly white spaces. What is some advice you would give maybe to students about how to navigate that kind of world?
Mm-hmm. Well, I first will maybe reflect on a couple experiences I've had or stories early on in my career. And the first one was just being a woman in engineering, first and foremost. I remember the first time that I got an email where it was someone who I hadn't met and they assumed that I was a guy. We were exchanging messages back and forth, and there was a thread, so there were a few people on that, and the company was quite large, so it's possible to work with someone who's in a completely different site and you wouldn't pass each other in the hall. And so I answered everything, and then the person was talking about me in third person and kept on saying he, right? And so then I responded. I provided all the technical information. I was the responsible design engineer at that time. And at the end of it, I just simply said, P.S. I'm a she, not a he. And in doing that, and again, I never actually met that person, and he responded and he apologized. I think he was maybe a little bit embarrassed. I would like to think, though, that the next time, would hope the next time that he sent something that he would maybe think twice before making an assumption, right? I recognize with having a foreign name for someone not to know. And also my name, even in Nigeria, is a unisex name. So it's actually fair. But that being said, with being a woman in engineering, the idea that there might be a default in what people assume if they don't know. I also remember the very first time that I changed groups. So I had been in one group for a little bit and now had a few years of experience, and then went to a different organization, a different site, and it was like starting all over again, right? So you have that nervousness of, I'm not as familiar with the products. The experience I had before, some of it might translate, but I'm basically back in, school again almost, and studying and learning these new products. And I attended a large design review meeting. It was maybe my second week. And when I walked into the room, I was the only woman in the room. I was the only person of color in the room. I was the youngest person. And I felt very much exposed, but then because I still hadn't found my voice yet in that role, I also kind of felt a little invisible at the same time. And in wanting to speak up, and at that moment, I didn't necessarily have the courage to speak up and ask questions. As I've gotten more experience, that doesn't stop me as much now, but in that moment, I did feel out of place and not sure, even though I'm curious, is it okay to ask a question? And so the advice I would give is that even in that moment, even when you are feeling like that fish out of water, ask the question anyway. Be curious, and because you never know who else may also have a similar question as you do, or people may assume everyone has the same understanding, but there's additional information that the person could provide. The other advice I will offer is really getting to know people at an individual level and connecting with them and understanding what they do and not just how it relates directly to what you do, but even indirectly. Like, we would talk about a value stream and the product development, and as different parts of the development passes on to different groups. And there might be someone that's 2-3 steps down this value stream from you. Still understand what they're doing, because that not only does that inform what you do, but then as they get to know you for who you are, then they can see you for who you are, not necessarily what you are. And of course, I'm still a Black woman engineer, but then they'll get to know me as Seyi, right? And as you get to know more people and then you go into other spaces, maybe when you walk into the room, there are some familiar faces. You may not, again, it might not even be in that role. It could be down the road 2 or 3 positions later. And so again, just building those individual connections is so, so important.
Fantastic. And I want to actually ask a question around this idea of being curious. I feel like this is not the first time I've heard that. Can you tell us how being curious has really helped you in your profession and who you are?
Definitely. I would say, well, you can get lost in Wikipedia. That's one thing. So don't necessarily do that. But in terms of being curious, I find that it helps me to truly get the full context of what I'm working on, right? So I might have a role, I've had a role where I'm a design engineer and I'm just, responsible for this mechanical aspect, but then what are the electrical engineers working on and how does that integrate, and understanding, well, why are they doing what they're doing? And then as I'm making decisions in my work, how am I impacting them? It allows me to be a better team member, essentially, and then a fuller understanding of the product. And even in working with other groups outside of engineering, so marketing, quality, supply chain, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all a part of a system. And so the more curious you are and learn about the system, I think the better we are in terms of, again, the decisions that we make. And also in building that connection with our fellow team members, which then we're even more effective in doing that work together once we've made that decision. So that's really helped me. I work with various groups in my roles that I've had, even especially now, and I try to make sure that I understand what they're doing. I'm not going to be the expert. That's what they are, the subject matter expert. But again, in trying to make that effort to understand what they're doing, it helps me in my work as I work with them.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and you also talked about getting to know people. You're able to build a network. I was wondering if you have maybe advisors, or we hear a lot about executive sponsor, especially when we are in the corporate world, to help support Black talent in moving along the company. And I was wondering if you have network advisors, or sometimes it's a board of advisors. Who inspires you and who's helping you along this journey?
So I would definitely say I have a board of advisors. I have, in making those connections throughout my career, working with either leads or former managers and maintaining those relationships, mentors, and that it's a mix. In all of those experiences, we've worked together, so they know me and they know how I operate, right? They know my strengths. And so when I have challenges, it's so important to have those people to go to who can remind you of your strengths, right? When maybe you aren't able to see them that directly yourself. Also, they are honest. They tell me the truth. So one of my mentors, who was also my former boss, he'll say to me, "Seyi, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective?" And then I have to stop and reflect and say, okay, in this moment with what I'm trying to achieve and these different paths, right? And again, it's someone that's going to be honest with you. So it's really helpful for me. I meet with a couple, maybe regularly. Others, we talk from time to time. And I think it's, again, people trust. And I know I can turn to pretty much at any time. And I continue to get to know more people and in different areas of my work and the company. It's something that you can never, in my opinion, know too many people, right? And the more that you get to learn, they share their experiences, and that there might be more than one path to get to where you're going, or even let you know what else is out there and where else you could go and what you can do and how you can build from this. So yes, it's definitely something I have. I feel very blessed that I have people that I trust and have gotten to know throughout my career, and I'm continuing to get to know.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm wondering, as you're obviously have a lot of experience right now, and would you look back and even wonder and say, in my undergrad career, I wish I did this, or is there one thing that you did that has helped you, or something you regret not doing that could have helped you? And what advice would you give our students here?
So I think one thing that I wish I knew freshman year, fall quarter, was to look for internships in the fall quarter. Because I remember getting towards the end of my freshman year and then realizing, oh, there's not very much out there. All of that recruiting and all of that stuff happened earlier, but I didn't know, right? Thankfully, I learned from that. And then the following year, I went out and I ended up doing a research internship at UCLA. But when I think back to what am I really grateful for and experienced in my undergraduate career were the team projects. If there was one thing that prepared me for working, it was working with teams in my undergraduate, and not just the experience, but making sure that you get what you need out of that experience. So one story, I was in my junior year and I was in mechanical design class, and we had to make a physical prototype, and the project spanned the entire quarter. So we were put into teams. We were a team of 4, and one of my teammates was very hands-on. Like as soon as we had to break out into sessions to work on the next aspect, very, very hands-on. And the 3 of us would kind of step back, and it's almost like, we were watching it happen. And I realized I was like, okay, but we're all here to have this experience, right? And it's really important in terms of sharing that. So I don't know if I called it an intervention, but we talked to him about it, to give him feedback. And it was very much to say, hey, we also are looking to have this experience. Is there a way that we can maybe change the roles a little bit more and distribute that? And first, he didn't realize that he was really appreciative of us giving him that feedback. And it changed the dynamic in that, okay, with everything we did, we were all very clear about, okay, who's doing what? Does this work for you, right? And communicating with each other. So it improved our communication as a team. I think it also helped build trust because we were willing to be honest with each other, but we were also approaching it from a place of grace as well. And I think for me, it was that early experience of how to give feedback and checking in with yourself to say, I'm a part of this experience too. Am I getting out of this experience, maybe what I need or what I'm seeking? And if I'm not, what steps am I taking to do that? So again, that was such a valuable experience. And I'd say anytime you can work with others on a team, it's so great, because everything I do in my career and have done has been working with other people. I can't get there on my own. I rely on my teammates. Even if I'm leading the team or if I'm supporting it, we are all relying on each other to get to that end goal. And so the earlier you have the experience of what that dynamic is like and what works for you, the better.
In collaboration, communication, and I'm just even wondering, when you've been part of teams in your professional life, have you, what's the word I'm looking for? Encountered a resistance of people being receptive to your ideas because of your identity, because, of maybe a hidden bias or in your teammates. Have you encountered that, and how did you deal with that?
So yes, and I have a couple stories to share, a couple experiences. One, it was in a prior position. I was maybe 5 or 6 years into my career at that point. So I got a bit of experience, right, with where I was. And it was working with a supplier, so external party. And we talked on the phone with this supplier and had become familiar. We were actually working on a quality issue where there would be a field action, and we're doing the technical assessment and risk of, okay, how soon do we have to do this and when, and just a lot of logistics. And so during this call, and again, the supplier, many of them I had not met, and had only heard me on the phone. So all they knew was my voice and my name and my position at the company. And at some point I was talking to one of the supplier teammates and asked her a series of questions. And she kind of muttered under her breath, I often have trouble understanding you. And in that tone, I remember, well, first, I think everyone felt a bit awkward. I think I might have heard a couple of her coworkers gasp. But then for me in that moment, I thought to myself, well, I'm confident in my command of the English language. However, what she knows about me is my voice and that my name is foreign, right? And I just then in that moment, I just repeated what I said. I said, okay, let me know what aspect isn't clear, and just kind of work through it. And I focused on the work and moved forward. And then after I got off the call, one of her colleagues called me immediately and apologized for the situation, said that they were talking to her. And that was, and then when I thought about it, it actually reminded me of some of the things that I know my mother has gone through. She's a nurse, highly experienced, extremely competent, was trained as a midwife in Nigeria and all of these things. And she speaks English fluently. She has a Nigerian accent, and people getting feedback that, oh, trouble understanding. I'm like, if you're listening, you can understand, right? And so it reminded me of that and how she faces that, and other people do. But again, when you focus on the work and when you do it well, no one can take that away from you. So that's one experience. Another experience I had was actually where I was, we were working with the suppliers, a different project. And there was a more senior engineer who was actually at my company. And we were talking about a tolerance analysis, and the feedback that I gave to the supplier was that it was not sufficient. I was looking for a worst case tolerance analysis, and they were not providing the worst case information. And the senior engineer, he didn't agree with me. And I would say the issue wasn't so much that he disagreed as much as that he was talking down to me and in front of the supplier on top of that. And the moment was, I will be honest, I was very frustrated. But again, I focused on the work. I focused on the expectations of what I was looking for as the engineer reviewing the analysis and what was missing. And I had some subsequent interactions with this senior engineer, and I had noticed how I was treated differently. My male colleagues would say something, and when I would agree with them, this person would critique me, but not in a way that they would the male engineers who just said the same thing. And it happened on more than one occasion. I observed that, but again, I focused on the work and said, I'm here to get this job done, and I'm going to do it well. And that's how I would move forward with it. I see when these things happen, but I don't let that get in the way of me focusing on what I am trying to achieve. And so, yeah, those are a couple experiences that immediately come to mind.
I can definitely relate, especially with having a foreign name, or when, in my case, I feel like hearing a foreign accent or a little accent, and suddenly people slow down to speak, And I'm like, I understand the language too. So yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah. And the thing is, everyone has an accent. Like, yes. No matter where you go, everyone has an accent. When I go visit family in the UK, remember some of my cousin's friends loved hearing me speak because they loved my American accent. I have a Californian accent. I get that, right? But again, interesting. And I will say, because with my family, family members being from Nigeria, having some family in the UK, family, friends, for me, if I hear someone who sounds a little bit different, I listen closer, right? And so, I think that it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm understanding, and if I'm not, I can ask the question. But again, I think that it's something that it's really important we keep in mind when we're working with people from different places and different experiences, that, at the end of the day, we can communicate with each other, and let's focus on listening maybe closer if we need to.
Yes, thank you. I have another question about organizations, and what advice would you give to leaders of organizations that are trying to attract Black, Indigenous, and professionals of color into their workplaces? What could they be doing better to attract and retain brilliant minds such as yourself?
Well, I will say that it's important to look at your current processes, right? And how we find talent and where. I think a lot of opportunities that people find are through their network. So if you continue to work with the same network, then that's going to be similar, right? And so how can you expand that network? When it comes to retention, I think that also supports attracting the talent, right? Because when people love work, they will encourage others to come there as well. I think for the retention part, I'd say, when you're in the room, look at who's not speaking up, and look and how can you create space for them to speak up and to feel that checking in. It's as simple as just asking someone, how are you doing? Or what is your opinion on this, right? I think those are the ways to help build that inclusivity. And when we do that with everyone, right, so creating space for everyone, I think especially helps for those who are an only. So that would be my advice, is again, just look for who's not speaking and create space for them.
You know, you've really said a lot for us this evening. I just want to remind our audience here that you could be putting questions in the chat, and we'll get to them here in just a little bit. And I had just maybe one or two more questions. And tell us, you know, right now it's been super challenging times. You know, we were talking earlier about maybe the remote work. How have you been, and how have you been finding joy now, especially in the workplace?
I find joy when people turn on their video. And it's true, and I even request that, but I mean, I'll be honest, I'm an extrovert, so it has been a transition for me. I did not realize how much energy I got out of my day going into the office every day and interacting with people and being in the same space, right? And so I think whenever I do have an opportunity to check in with someone and get to see their face on the screen, you know, and all that nonverbal communication, that's really been really valuable for me personally. I also find that, you know, it used to be when we were all sitting together in an office or near each other, we get to pass by just easily. You take for granted that you had that 5-minute chat with a person whose desk is on the way, you know, to the coffee area, right? And so some of the things I'm doing now is also just setting up a quick get together or chat or tea time, afternoon tea time, or, you know, with people who we don't necessarily always work together directly. And so I'm not communicating with them as often. And so that is also helpful, I've found. I'm also making sure to take walks and breaks and fresh air, because again, these are the things that when I'm commuting in and going into the office, it just kind of is happening, and having to be more mindful about that. So those are a few of those things for me that have really helped.
And my final question this evening for you is, you know, what can you know, what else would you like to share with us tonight about, you know, showing up as your authentic self at work, or in this world, just showing up, really? So I'd love to hear anything else you'd like to share with us.
So I will say that you never know what other people have gone through, what they're going through, right? And sometimes we may not feel that this is the space to say what we think or ask a question, you know, or even stand up for ourselves. But it's so critical, because you don't know who you are inspiring when you speak up, when you ask that question, just being who you are, right? You don't know. And I also, for me, I think about, especially as a Black woman and a child of immigrants and all the sacrifices, there are people who, you know, went through so much just so I could have the opportunity to do what I have been able to do. And they did not let fear stop them from, you know, from pushing. And so when I think about that, I cannot let that fear silence me or anyone else. So that, I guess, would be what I'd leave it with is, and it's not easy. And sometimes in that moment, if you're scared, just take a breath, take a deep breath and do it anyway. Ask that question, speak up, walk through that door into that room where you are the only one, and hold your head high when you do it.
Wow, you're really honoring the footsteps and the pathways that have been set ahead for you, and by the people who inspire you. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for your comments and advice this evening. And right now, I'd like to open it up for our students and guests here today to ask questions. And as you heard, she likes you to see your video, so don't be shy. Again, don't fight that fear of being on camera. And welcome to the conversations. And yeah, we'll be taking questions now.
Yeah, I have a question or a comment. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I could relate to most of the stories that you were talking about, coming from Congo, Africa, like how to represent yourself, showing up for yourself. And I just wanted to share that sometimes when you feel like you have that imposter syndrome and you feel like you don't belong, I noticed that like being confident with yourself really helps. So sometimes I try to be overconfident just to make me feel better, but sometimes you do have days where you really just can't, like you can't fake it till you make it. And I just wanted to ask if you had days where you were like, I can't do it, and what kept you going?
Yes, I have had those days. I've had those nights even leaving work late, right? And kind of, feeling maybe a little bit frustrated, I'd say, or even something where I don't know what my next move is, right? And that can be hard to be comfortable with being uncertain. That is where having, we'd say, a board of advisors or just someone that knows you really well that you can pick up the phone and call. For me, that helps me so much. That's, gives me strength. Another thing is my mom raised us with this term, every disappointment is a blessing. And it's when I'm facing that either a disappointment or a challenge and I say, okay, there may be something else here or another path or another way to go, right? And even if I'm maybe not feeling like my best self, or as you said, can't continue to fake it, right? That, okay, what else is here? I also make a point to really capture my wins, I'd say. So it could be, I personally have a blessings journal, getting back to every disappointment is a blessing. So even if it's a bad day, looking for that. And a part of what helps me with that is writing down, especially whenever I've overcome a challenge, and then I can come back to it later. Because sometimes in those moments, we forget we've already overcome so much. You have achieved, right? You have had those moments where you didn't know what to do and then you figured it out, or something else changed and you found a way, like how water finds a way. And so for me, having that either documented, I can come back to it and say, what was I doing a year ago on this day? And looking back at those wins helps give me that strength if I'm, maybe not able to make a call or just need a quick reminder. So those are a couple of things that I do.
Great question, Christiana. Thank you. Angie?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Seyi, for being here and sharing just all those wonderful words for all of us. I'm curious to hear, as you mentioned about the advisor story, that was a wonderful story about your advisor who said job and internship, or grad school, do both. So I'm curious for the advisors on this call, what is some advice that from your student lens that you would share with us about things that, 2 or 3 things that advisors should be sharing when they're working with students of color, for example?
That's a really good question. So just to understand, it's, what advice I would have liked or would like to have heard when I was a student.
Yes.
Well, I think one thing is, so when I started off my freshman year, I actually started off as electrical engineering. So at Stanford, you can't technically, everybody comes in undeclared, and then you declare your major. And I, at the time, picked electrical engineering, but I didn't necessarily know as much about it. And then halfway through, I decided that when I looked at the offerings for mechanical engineering, that I was actually more excited. For me personally, I felt more that I connected with those topics more and transitioned. So I think one thing, especially for a freshman, is just, even if someone says that this is what they want to do, it's sort of getting the question of why. And even in me changing majors, it actually became out of a conversation I had with a senior. I was a sophomore and she was a senior. And when I told her I'm doing electrical engineering, and she said, oh, why are you doing that? And then it just kept going. And it wasn't necessary to change my mind, but just to, expand my view and to understand, okay, what are the options before you? That's, I think, one bit of advice that I think, especially as a freshman, is helpful. And again, my advisor, the idea of the parallel path, right? That you can go, different ways. And I think maybe the last thing too is really having others maybe to pair up with. I know we had this like big Civ, little Civ program when I was at Stanford for the Black community, but I think especially in engineering or in that field, someone else, suggesting, hey, this would be a good person for you to maybe get to know, who's on a similar path or is, interested in that. It's a way of networking, obviously, but then also the more exposure that I think a student can have to someone who's been through the experience, because we don't necessarily always get to know people in other class years ahead of us.
Thank you.
That's such a good question, Angie, and it's actually made me think of a question of, in places where you've been told no, but it's something that you really wanted to do, you probably did it anyway, but how did you walk through that piece of like, no, don't tell me no. I will work through this. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think that's really great. And I can think of one experience I had where I saw that we had a process, right, where it seemed that there was an area of the part that wasn't quite stable, and every time we changed it, it was actually leading to a lot of scrap for our suppliers and rework. And so I had an idea that, hey, maybe we can, move this information somewhere else, and so we're not necessarily wasting materials, but it was going to be a lot of additional work. And initially, again, everyone has, I think, what motivates them or what they're focusing on. And so the initial response was no, because at that time, that group particularly had limited resources. And so, but I continued to try and look at, okay, so first, let me just look through all the different parts and how much effort it would be and how much time, and just try to understand, when we say that this is effort, well, what do we mean? How do we quantify it? How do we get the data? And talking to that person, one-on-one, and working through it, and also conveying what I was trying to achieve, like what I was seeing, what I was trying to avoid. And eventually, I think we came up with, for things that were already at a certain point, what made sense, right? I understood what their concerns were, what they saw as risk, and we came up with a plan together for how we could implement it where it would have the least impact and risk. But I also was persistent too. And I do think face-to-face communication, or we could say video-to-video communication in this day, really helps. I try to avoid having conversations via email, especially if there is some resistance. So that, again, and you're building relationships that way as well. And then being willing to understand that maybe what I'm setting out to do, like in this case with this idea that I had, it didn't quite get implemented the way that I envisioned, but it got us closer to where I wanted us to go. And so that's the other thing too, is recognizing, back to the whole, do you want to be right or effective, right? Maybe it's not going to be 100% yes, but I'll take a partial if it gets us in that direction.
Other questions? Are we being shy?
Okay, I have another question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned having mentors before that really helped you. I guess my question was, what did you do to keep the relationship going with them? Because sometimes you can network with a mentor, you talk once, and then you don't know how to keep like building that relationship. What are some of your advice for that?
Mm-hmm. So I can think of specific. So one of my former managers, when we did a reorganization, Basically, I was going to be reporting to a different manager. And I had noticed that that manager had really been coaching me and mentoring me. And so I suggested, would you be open to meeting once a month just to check in? And in fact, I made it a 45-minute meeting. So it was like a little more than half an hour, but not a full hour, right? And you know, with that, and he was really open to it and appreciated that. And so and then that way we always had this regular check-in. Sometimes it would get canceled, right? You know, for whatever reason, but I usually try to reschedule, right? So we weren't having too much time in between. And I found that that helped to continue maintaining that relationship. Similarly, I had a coworker who, you know, also had mentored me and had moved on to another company. And, you know, I said to him, okay, after you've had a few months to get settled in, let's do a check-in, right? So I think being very deliberate about that and following up. And I think especially if you connect, right? I mean, what are maybe some specific advice that you're looking for and guidance to, and saying, oh, you know, the next time we speak, I'd really like to talk to you about this, right? And so then they know when you have that discussion, like what you're looking for, and that can help maybe focus the conversation as well. But I think that if you can, especially if you connect with a mentor, finding a way to have, it could be once a month or even every 2 months, but just having that recurring, you know, space that you both are expecting to reconnect.
Thank you. Any more questions? I know it's late. Yeah. All right. Well, then I think then we can safely say, you know, we're so appreciative of you being here today. Mary Lou, I see you on mute. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say thank you, Seyi. Yes, your words of advice are great. I love bringing your authentic self. You are a beautiful person. Thank you. Thanks for sharing with our students. Shirley, thank you as well, and the rest of the Stryker folks. Yes.
So thank you everyone for being here this evening. I really appreciate hearing from from us guests today, Seyi. Shirley, thank you so much for organizing, and Amy for joining, and Tom for joining us as well. Stryker has always been a good partner. Every so often we just kind of find things that click and to just fall in place beautifully. So I appreciate that a lot. And to Nesby, you are such a great group of students, and I appreciate you being here and you know, just stepping in. And actually, a lot of the questions today were submitted originally by Nesby, so I appreciate that as well. And partners in Albers Placement Center, Angie Jenkins as the advisor of Nesby, I appreciate you so much. So thank you everyone for coming tonight.